Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, Jeremy Corbyn is obviously both hip and happening. Stormzy and others endorsed him in the viral Grime for Corbyn campaign. Even my good friend Big Nasty told me that he was a gas stench buffeting, which the This Week interns tell me is a good thing, which surprises me. After rapper JME, Captain Corbs has now appeared on the cover of edgy magazine NME, which he hopes will appeal to the youth vote. NME's so edgy, was around when I was a teenager. In fact, he's not the first Labour leader to appear on the front of NME. Neil Kinnock, Tony Blair and Ken Livingstone all featured, and look how well it served them. Comrade Corbyn can clearly look forward to a glorious legacy. Here's Andrew Ronsley with his roundup of the political week.
The English team is now batting. England's captain, Mr. Jardine, is now facing the bowling of Grimmett.
The British summer has finally arrived, and with it, cricket, Mrs. May's favourite sport. Can you hear the clunk of leather on willow? Or is that the sound of Tory jaws dropping as they contemplate the state of their campaign? The polls, for what they're worth, have been tightening. Some in Theresa's team are getting twitchy, and the captain, who sold herself as so strong and stable, has looked uncertain at the crease. So in the final full week of play, they went back to their original game plan, which was to try to make it all about Brexit.
Britain is about to enter into the most important negotiations of my lifetime. They begin just 11 days after polling day, and the European Union is already adopting an aggressive negotiating position. Jeremy Corbyn's minders can put him in a smart blue suit for an interview with Jeremy Paxman, but with his position on Brexit, he will find himself alone and naked in the negotiating chamber of the European Union.
We know the Conservatives are getting a bit desperate, but really, trying to threaten us with the idea of the bearded one in the buff is their no-scare tactic that the Tories won't stoop to. Captain May was still on a very sticky wicket when it came to her U-turns and what that might mean when she faced fast bowling from the European 27.
If I was sitting in Brussels and I was looking at you as the person I had to negotiate with, I'd think, she's a blowhard who collapses at the first sign of gunfire.
I've had a grandstand seat for a lot of political test matches. One unusual thing about this campaign is how little of it has been about tax and spending, usually central to British elections. That seems to have made some of the players a bit casual in front of the wicket. On the day that he launched his party's policy on childcare, Jeremy Corbyn visited Woman's Hour. Perhaps his coaches thought the Labour leader would face some easy bowling from a female interviewer. They were wrong.
How much will it cost?
It will cost... It will obviously cost a lot to do so. We accept that.
I presume you have the figures.
Yes, I do. It does cost a lot to do it. The point I'm trying to make is that we're making it universal, and we'll collect the money through taxation, mainly through corporate taxation.
So how much will it cost?
I'll give you the figure in a moment.
You don't know it? You're logging into your iPad.
Stumped. But hey, it's only one of the major commitments in his manifesto. It's not like he was forgetting anything important. And to be fair, the only reason the Tories don't forget the costings in their manifesto is because there are no costings in their manifesto. The Labour leader faced a lot of bouncers about his attitude towards terrorism.
I never met the IRA. I obviously did meet people from Sinn Féin, as indeed I met people from other organisations. I have not spoken to the IRA. I have in the past,
shared a
still
platform
do,
with a former...
often meet people from Sinn Féin.
I did
make contact with Sinn Féin when they were not allowed to travel, their leadership was not allowed to travel to Britain, for example. I wanted there to be a process.
As for Shadow Home Secretary and maths prodigy Diane Abbott, she dismissed her record as ancient history.
It was 34 years ago. I had a rather splendid afro at the time. I don't have the same hairstyle. And I don't have the same views. It is 34 years on. The hairstyle has gone and some of the views have gone.
I speak to Tories who are a bit baffled that this issue hasn't done more damage to the other side. Perhaps it's because to a lot of voters, especially younger voters, it is history. Now, Boris Johnson, remember him? Blonde, shaggy, once a famous stroke maker, now usually to be found at silly mid-off, if he's to be found at all. The selectors have confined Boris to the dressing room for most of this match, but he was briefly let out to attempt some wild sledging of Labour's Andrew Gwynn.
Are you saying you're going to stay in the single market?
I agree.
Are you going to stay in the single market?
I agree.
Is that what, you're out of the single market, are you?
Yes. Yes.
Out of the customs union?
Boris,
are you?
You know what our position is.
No, I don't think you know what your position is.
I voted to trigger Article 50.
I don't think you know what your position is.
So, in or out, umpire? In or out? Mrs May gave herself out when the party leaders were invited to take part in the BBC debate. The Tory skipper decided she preferred to rest in the pavilion rather than make her case to the country. That didn't stop everyone else talking about her. Tim Farron was quite witty about it.
Where do you think Theresa May is tonight? Take a look out your window. She might be out there sizing up your house to pay for your social care. And why do you think she called this election? She wants 5 years as Prime Minister, and she thinks you'll give it to her, no questions asked, literally.
She won't turn up to these debates because her campaign of sound bites is falling apart.
Where's strength and stability gone? Weak and wobbly is where we are, not so much the Iron Lady as the U-turn Queen.
Well, I've never changed my stance, pretty much, on anything. I don't flip-flop. I've always been, for example, a Brexiteer.
The first rule of leadership is to show up. You don't call a general election. You don't call a general election and say it's the most important election in her lifetime, and then not even be bothered to come and debate the issues at stake.
Time to stop play for tea. This week has generously provided this hamper. No expense spent. Fancy a tipple? The BBC debate was a lively affair, despite the absence of the Tory captain, or maybe precisely because Mrs May wasn't there with her dead bat. Jeremy Corbyn made a late decision to turn up. The visceral difference between Labour and the Tories, the essential clash between their world views, was captured by this exchange between him and the Tory leader's stand-in, Amber Rudd.
Jeremy, I know there is no extra payment you don't want to add to, no tax you don't want to rise. But the fact is we have to concentrate our resources on the people who need it most. And we have to stop thinking, as you do, that there's a magic money tree.
Have you been to a food bank? Have you seen people sleeping around our stations? Have you seen... Have you seen the level...
Jeremy, I need
have
to
you
answer
seen
that.
the levels
like
of poverty that exist because of your government's conscious decisions on benefits?
Who will be in? Who will be out? The ultimate umpire, you, the voters, will deliver the verdict in just 7 days' time.
And with us now, the lovely, delightful Miranda Green and the SNP's Tommy Shepherd, who reckons he's better looking, more charismatic and funnier than his colleague John Nicholson, who we've never heard of. John Nicholson? No, don't remember anything. Michael, this campaign's not gone exactly to plan for the Tories, has it?
No campaign ever goes to plan. I think, though, that you will...
This hasn't just not gone to plan, it's kind of veered spectacularly off plan.
No, I don't think
Theresa Mayish non-answer.
I think that I'm doing my...
Catching of the Tories.
Do my Jeffrey Boycott bit. No, I think the critical thing about this campaign is that all of us are attempting to make a judgment on the basis of what other people, with respect to your earlier comments about the Westminster bubble, in the Westminster bubble are saying. People love the fact that they can write a narrative about polls narrowing, but we don't know which of the polls are going to be accurate. We've been in a position beforehand where polls have misled us about the eventual result, and many people who made predictions during the course of a campaign about how it would turn out have shown that they have egg on their face. And the point you made right at the beginning of the programme is that some of the virtues that political commentators hymn are often the exact opposite of what the public appreciate in their leaders.
Are you surprised how well Jeremy Corbyn seems to be doing?
I think in the election, Theresa May started in a great strong position and she's been a bit exposed. Jeremy Corbyn started with people having written him off, people who hadn't ever seen him often, having a caricature, and actually he's turned out to be able to perform in a way which makes him seem more reasonable,
he looks like
more
he's
reflective.
Enjoying it.
I think actually over
Mrs.
the
May looks like she can't wait for it to come to an end.
And clearly there's people who were going to vote Green or UKIP or Liberal Democrat who've come to Labour. There doesn't seem to be a lot of Labour-Tory switching going on. In fact, the Tories have held their position quite strongly in most of the
third
polls.
Parties have gravitated to Labour.
And I think
it's been interesting.
There's no doubt that Jeremy has enjoyed it and done better than people expected. But the fundamental question is, can he get over the leadership hurdle he faces in the comparison with Theresa May? If he does, he's a contender, but that is a very, very difficult thing to pull off.
Is it more of a race now than it was at the start, or is Mrs. May still the clear favourite?
I think she's probably still the favourite, but it's certainly it's not the foregone conclusion that it was. And certainly I think the idea of the Conservatives coming back with some sort of stonking majority and the humiliation of the opposition, that doesn't really seem to be in the cards.
Which was the kind of hope at the beginning for the Tories, wasn't it?
Theresa May called this election to try and strengthen her hand, particularly in her control of the Conservative Party. Yes. It doesn't look as if that's going to turn out quite that way. I mean, Michael will know better than me, but I guess the real campaign will begin on June the 9th inside the party, because I think Theresa May is pretty badly damaged as a result of what we see.
If she doesn't deliver this landslide majority that
she's got to win 100 seats.
It looks like in England and Scotland, in different ways, but in both these countries, we're back to two-party politics.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a definite feeling, both in England and in Scotland, that people want a strong opposition, because this idea of sort of one-party rule seems to go down quite badly, particularly when the nation's sort of in crisis. But that kind of weird binary election that we're seeing is not really the period of history we thought we were living through. You know, we thought this was the beginning of plural politics, you know, very close elections. Doesn't seem to be the case at all. But, I mean, that might be an anomaly, because obviously we're only a year away from the Brexit referendum, which is a yes-no existential choice, and if this is the post-Brexit election, maybe we'll go back to something more plural afterwards. I would certainly hope so, I must say, because, you know, as the BBC would say, other brands are available.
But it does seem that the third parties are being squeezed out. In Scotland, the dynamic has come down to the Scottish Nationalists and the Tories. Who would have funked that? And in England, it's very much now become down between Labour and Conservative.
Yeah, I think the battle in Scotland probably is between the SNP and the Conservatives, and if the SNP is probably under more threat in seats from the Conservatives than it is from Labour. Although recent polls, Andrew, indicate that, you know, there is a battle going on now for second place. I mean, the last poll yesterday had the Tories and Labour equal in Scotland, both on 25%.
So Labour had come up?
Labour had come up, that gap had narrowed. But I still think there's a very strong chance the Conservatives will come second.
Why have the Conservatives not made more of the economy in this election?
Well, I think that the economic argument is linked to the Brexit argument. And one of the central questions is, who do you trust in those negotiations to deliver the right outcome? And if the right outcome is secured, then obviously the economy flourishes in a way that it wouldn't if you ended up with a botched or a broken-backed deal. And that's been central to the argument. I think the other thing is also the economy lies behind a number of the questions that have been raised about, for example, the funding of Labour's proposals. The Institute for Fiscal Studies made the point that while on a superficial level Labour can say increasing this tax will raise this amount of money, actually the dynamic effect on the economy of increasing so many taxes will be to depress growth.
But the IFS has said that.
Yes.
But the Tories have barely said that at all. And you know, for the first, what will it be, 6.5 years of this government's life, it was all about getting the deficit down, about fiscal prudence, about balancing or getting the public finances into better shape. And now it seems that because that is so associated with Osborne and Cameron, Mrs May doesn't want to mention it. It's almost like she's running against them as well as Corbyn.
Just you wait and see, Andrew, is the one thing I would
we're running
cancel.
out of time. I've been waiting and seeing. I'm beginning to lose interest.
Having been inside some campaigns which have succeeded against the odds and some other campaigns that have completely tanked, one of the things that I'm aware of is that timing is all. And it's in the last few days that you deploy some of your strongest arguments. I confidently expect that more of the focus in these last few days will be on the fundamental economic danger that Corbyn poses.
Because there has to be a vulnerability, which maybe they will, as Michael says, do it. But the Tories haven't exploited it yet. It's at least a legitimate question to ask, could Mr Corbyn really raise the extra 50 billion for current spending by purely taxing the top 5% and business?
Look, there were some really challenging, difficult questions on Manifesto Day for Labour about whether the sums add up. The most interesting thing is how, as you said, the Tories have been able to exploit this. And the reason is, as Andrew Rawnsley said, they are the first government that I can remember which hasn't had a really sound, costed, solid position itself to then go for the Tories. So when Theresa May on Monday says that Labour's plans don't add up, everybody yells, but neither do yours.
Sure. I mean, John McDonnell had that great line, the only numbers in the Tory manifesto are the page numbers.
I think the thing, though, which is really hard to read with this election is that we know in the Brexit vote there was a big divide between young people and older people, as we've seen and discussed today, but also between the cities and what's happening outside the cities and the small towns where the marginal seats tend to be. The question is, for Labour, is Labour stacking up votes in the cities, amongst Remain voters, amongst younger people, or are they actually reaching into the marginal seats?
And
if they are, they've got a chance, but that is a much, much tougher thing for them to do.
I don't think anybody, even if the SNP is coming off an incredible high, and even if it loses some seats, it probably will lose some. I don't think anybody doubts the SNP will still be clearly, in terms of seats, the biggest party.
I think we'll win the election
in Scotland. But why has Nicola Sturgeon's personal rating suffered so badly?
Well, I don't know that it has, to be honest.
All right, well, I'll give you the figures. They're down 18 points. She now has a negative rating of -4.
I don't know those figures, Andrew, but I tell you what, I meet people on the doorstep who say, oh, I don't like Nicola Sturgeon, and I asked them, well, do you like Alex Salmond? And so I never liked him neither. And I think quite often people transfer an attitude onto the leader of a party, which really is just a proxy for the fact that they don't like that party.
But the party is polling better than the leader.
Nicola Sturgeon is a very strong asset for the SNP. There's no question about that. She's been front and centre of this campaign in every part of the country.
Is it partly because she may have misjudged the mood of the Scottish people, that she thought that the Brexit vote was going to increase the appetite for independence and for a second referendum? But there is no evidence that it has on either of these cases.
Well, there's evidence that Brexit has changed a lot of people's minds. I admit that's been in both directions. Obviously, there's this churn going on in public opinion. But, you know, I think it's important to say that the SNP and Nicola Sturgeon have said that we need to have a choice in Scotland on whether the Brexit deal is actually the United Kingdom people voted for in 2014, or whether they would prefer to take control of things themselves. But that's not on the ballot paper on the 8th of June. That's at least a couple of years away. That's after we know what the Brexit deal actually is. And the Conservatives have been fighting pretty much a single issue in Scotland.
On the independence issue.
Only on independence. There's no mention of strong and stable leadership.
But they hope to wrap the unionists vote around them, don't they?
Yes, they're trying to coalesce the anti-SNP vote around them, and there's a little bit of evidence that, particularly with older voters, there is a little bit of transference from Labour to the Conservatives, but it's really 1 or 2 points. It's not enough to be...
It's not enough to sweep them into
and I
lots
think
of
now
seats.
you may be having there may be the opposite effect happening with the younger demographic, which is balancing it out.
Now, the Lib Dems are coming off a low base, or starting on a low base, but if you look at the Labour Party is now run by a proud socialist, clearly from the left of the Labour Party. The Lib Dems think Mrs May is going for a hard or even extreme Brexit. If the Lib Dems as a moderate centrist party can't make any breakthrough in that environment, then when could they make a breakthrough?
Well, I think that would be the case if kind of having a large space to occupy in the national debate was the same thing as winning seats under first past the post, particularly in an election where it has become very polarised and binary. And I think they're in a really difficult position. Also, a bit like the SNP in Scotland, it turns out that promising another referendum is not going down too well. You know, there's a certain amount
even
of
among
voter fatigue.
Remain voters.
That's right. And in fact, if this general election had come in 2020 as expected, that message may have gone down slightly differently, but as it is, people are not welcoming it, other than in those urban, very heavily Remain areas, which are kind of fertile territory for the Lib Dems. But I think it's a very difficult election for them because they haven't been able to take advantage of what seems like a great opportunity, but is actually more of the squeeze that you usually get.
They thought it was. And has the problem been the messenger rather than the message?
Well, I think it always helps if a smaller party has a leader that's more popular and sort of a larger figure than the party itself. You know, even back to David Steel, that was the case. You know, David Steel was the most popular politician in the whole country, and the Liberal Party
and it's not in that position at the moment.
It's not in that position at the moment, and that makes it difficult. But, you know, after the election, Corbyn has not been humiliated, as you say. He will come out of this very strong. So it doesn't look as if the moderate wing of Labour will be able to take over again. And then maybe if you've got the Lib Dems up a few seats but not many, the Labour moderates don't know what to do. Maybe we'll have our Macron moment, who knows?
It will depend upon the result
for
Jeremy Corbyn, and actually, you know, for all the polls pointing in lots of different directions, what actually matters is what happens on polling day. And the Tories will hope that them being down a bit in the polls will galvanise the vote. The interesting thing about the Liberal Democrats is, in all my lifetime, you've always had a Liberal Democrat leader who sort of surged through, grew in popularity with the exposure. It used to happen to Charles Kennedy, definitely to Nick Clegg.
Indeed.
This time round, that doesn't seem to have happened in the same way.
No.
Just finally, if Mrs May does not increase her majority, or if she has a smaller majority, or indeed if she only ends up as the largest party, she's holed below the waterline, isn't she?
No.
She couldn't survive.
No, absolutely. Well, first of all,
she couldn't survive. Called an election and effectively lost it.
I think
she's
toast.
No,
toast.
Teresa's
without the butter.
It's not totally clear that being backed by Michael is the best thing to happen to her at the moment. So I mean, you know,
or any leader.
I think you should lay into her.
No, the first thing is.
Brief final point.
No.
Or should we just laugh?
No. I was going to say, yes, Ed makes, but my endorsement is never necessarily a good thing. But I think, for what it's worth, that this is all speculation. Theresa May will increase her majority, and everyone who's a serious observer of politics thinks.
I've been used tonight to not having my questions answered, and I don't just mean on this show. So we'll move on. Miranda, Tommy, thank you for being with us tonight.
I've been